Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Oh, hi.
All right. I think we're ready to start our next segment here. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go into a lifetime of design and color and animated features with Michael Kurinsky.
Woo.
Do you think you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to talk about today?
Sure. So my name is Michael Kurinsky. I am currently my position is a production designer. The last thing I worked on was the movie Scoob that came out directly on streaming this past March. And I've been in the industry for longer than I care to think about. It's like 26 years or something like that. And I'll talk about this a little bit and I'll show you stuff, but I started at Disney Feature. I worked at Sony for many, many years, and most recently, like I said, with Warner Brothers. And yeah, I've kind of done a bunch of different things that we'll talk about in this talk, and I'll show you some examples from several movies that I've worked on. Hello?
So sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I couldn't hear anything. Yeah.
So it's a talk about, you're going to give some examples about.
So mostly my biggest strength, I think, in what I do is my use of color and light. I've done several color scripts for many movies, and I was a background painter before that. So painting in color and light is sort of a specialty of mine. So what I'm going to talk about today is um, about color scripting for a movie, how you use color to help support and tell the story. And I'll get into some technical things about how I do it. And then I'll break down several movies of why we did it this way and why I chose the colors and the type of lighting that I did. And it'll span through going from movies that I worked on at Sony, and then sort of the finale is going through the color script of Scoob. So it's semi-autobiographical, but it's also kind of technical at the same time for artists who want to learn about how a color script is made.
Well, that sounds amazing. I guess I'll just let you go ahead and jump into it then.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with everybody and we'll get started. Okay, and let's do this. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing a black screen. Do you guys see this, the power of color and light?
We see the power of color and light.
Okay, so let's get started. The power of color and light. What do I mean by that, the power of color and light? Well, um, color and lighting, especially in an animated movie, but in all movies, is such a powerful tool for help telling a story. I mean, if you really think about it, if you never heard, before you hear a note of music, before you hear a line of dialogue, just seeing sometime an establishing shot, the colors they use, the lighting that's used on it, it almost tells you where you're about to go in that movie. It's such a powerful tool visually, and I think it's an immediate response for people when they see certain types of light and color. And as animation artists, we're storytellers, and there's all the different disciplines of storyteller or artists in animation. Meaning, like, it's pretty obvious. Writers who write animated movies, they use their words to tell the story, and animators, they use acting to help tell the story. But what about the artists? You know, what do we tell our story with? So we tell our story. We help support the story visually with color and light and design. See, it's because certain colors evoke emotions and feelings. Like in this one, the shot in Scoob, very warm, happy light. So you can evoke emotions of happiness and friendship and love, or sadness, isolation, desperation, just with the colors that you use. Whereas different from the colors, the quality of light also is a really effective tool in storytelling. That quality can help also affect the mood of something. Like in this shot in Scoob, having such high contrast lighting adds to the excitement of this moment. It's sort of high contrast and high key colors make things more visually exciting, and it supports exciting action. Whereas something like this, where it's softer and more somber, and this spotlight really helps literally put a spotlight and a focus on this character's sadness and isolation in this moment. So it's not just the colors that are used, it's the kind of light. And we're going to talk about that and different examples of that in the movies. So a color script is a way that we map out all this color and lighting and emotional beats in an animated film. It's a very complicated thing, but really the way that I think about it is like with the colors is when you come into a movie in the beginning, let's say, so sad, all the way sad is blue and all the way happy is yellow, and somewhere in between is different emotions. But like usually when we begin a movie, the characters in usually what I call stasis. They're in a rut. That something needs to change in their life, and then something does change, and it's usually amazing, and it takes them on this journey, and they usually get up to the halfway point, and things are going good, and you think things are going great for our hero, and then of course the bad guys have to close and then crash. It has to go down, and it gets very sad again, and then that's the point where our hero has to build themselves back up and to this happy ending and sort of triumph at the end. And color and lighting can all help support that. And how does it start? It starts with a script. I start reading a script and making notes right on the side, right on the edges here, how this scene makes me feel. And I just put down buzzwords, even colors and things like that. I just start writing things down of how the scene makes me feel and what I think is the appropriate lighting just from reading it. And then from there, my first step is color bars. So what are color bars? So what color bars are, if you look at little sections of these longer bars here, each one of these, like about 1 inch of each one of these, of this whole bar represents a sequence in a movie. And so what I do is I look at those notes that I took in the script, and also the other things. I look at things like, is it supposed to be taking place during the day? Is it at night? And I start making groupings of colors that I think will look great and support that moment, that beat. So these are the color bars that I did for Scoob, for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and for Hotel Transylvania 2. So let's talk about how I go about doing color bars and what they actually mean. Okay, so sometimes I go back to, when you started art school, for the artists that are out there watching this, you took those 101 classes and like color. I had one called Color and Composition, and you learn things about stuff like complementary colors. And sometimes just going back to those foundation learning episodes in your life are where to begin. So complementary colors, blue and orange, are complements. And think about the endless amount of blues and oranges that you can combine. And just making a palette out of blues and oranges can become a color key, because blues and oranges work well together because they're complements. You could go back to things like triad colors, which triad colors are colors that are opposite and complete opposites from points on the color wheel. And they work really well together because they give a lot of dynamic punch to each other, like when they're all grouped together. And that was the thinking for this sequence in Scoob. Or you could do monochromatic types of palettes, or analogous meaning colors that are very close to each other on the color wheel. And you can come up with color bars like that. And that was what I wanted to do in this sequence in Scoob. And we're going to talk about these in greater depths, but it really starts with some of the basics. None of this is overly complicated. It's what we should be all learning in art school. Here's another way that I come up with color bars too. Like, you ever notice, like, sometimes you're watching a movie and it's just visually beautiful and it makes you crazy excited and you're like, I love the way this movie looks. And so I do that. I watch movies all the time like that. And it's like, I want to remember this. I want to use this, maybe this palette or this lighting in a movie that I might be production designing someday. So what I do is I'll grab frames from the movie and turn it into an abstract so that I'm no longer looking at the Grand Budapest Hotel. I'm just looking at an abstract series of colors that then I can turn into whatever my environment is. And I know they work because they worked here. So one way to do that is you get your frames and you go into Photoshop and you go to Pixelate, you go to Mosaic, and you can turn this up where you can get you know, several different size squares in it. And before you know it, it's no longer a hotel lobby. It's just an abstract set of squares that you know creates this analogous bunch of colors together, this color bars kind of. And then this is no longer two people on a carousel. It's a blue and orange composition. And then you take that and you can turn those into color bars. And you can squirrel those away in a folder somewhere. And when maybe you have a movie and you're working on it and you want to think of a palette, and you go, oh, I'm going to go look at my color bars. Here they are. And they're no longer a scene from a movie. They're abstracts. And now you apply them knowing that they work. You can apply them to your own scene and then manipulate and work with them and everything like that. But that's another way to just get you started, because it's taken from something that you know is kind of proven and works for you. So then my next step before jumping into a full-on color script and doing all those paintings is to do something called mood boards. It's something I did on Scoob, and I found it really, really helpful to get approvals on where I wanted to go before you do all of that painting. Believe me, you do a ton of painting when you do a color script. So getting approvals on things in an easier way is always good. So what I did with this is I took a lot of photographs of what I thought was going to be what our set was going to look like, similar things. In this case, it was like the streets of Santa Monica and the interior of a bowling alley, for those of you who haven't seen Scoob. This is a sequence in the movie. And what I did was I go in and I photo bash these things together. I don't think any of these skies were the actual sky that were in any of these photographs. I do a lot of painting on top of them, but it's very, very quick work. You don't have to get there and do a ton of detailing. And it's easy then to put in front of a director, a producer, some executives, and just go, this is what we were thinking for time of day. This is what we were thinking for the interior to look like, without having to do a ton of detailed painting, but it gets the point across really, really quickly. And if they want changes, you can make those changes just as quickly. Here's that red room again that I showed you that key earlier, that monochromatic palette. And these were taken, this was actually a photograph of the back room of a bowling alley that I took and brought it into Photoshop, turned it all red, and took some pictures, found some photographs of submarines and things like that. And it's a quick way just to get something up and go, this is how red I want this to go. And they go, oh, okay, they get it right away, without having to do a ton of painting. But also not having to, if I showed them the color bars, that may be too abstract for them. And they'd be like, oh, I don't see it. This is a way for them to go, I see it, without it actually being a ton of work. And then here's another sequence where, again, there's something in the alleyways, and there's a ton of painting in these. I don't think any of these colors that were in here were actually there in the photographs that I found, and the skies and everything, I completely manipulated them, added in these blue laser beams so that they could get an idea of where I wanted the end of this sequence to go. Again, very quick. It took a few hours to make these color boards, and before you know it, I could have the whole movie laid out just using manipulated photographs. And once you get that buy off, you can move into color keys. Another way to do them, though, sometimes I do paintings. And like in this case, this was a painting that was done for development. It was done in what we call white light. Like the whole room was lit up like if it was just 12 noon or there was just a white light on the ceiling. And I took that painting and manipulated it to give me the kind of lighting that I wanted for this particular sequence, and then did 2 quick keys from, these were done from hand-done storyboards. And you put them together, gives a quick idea of which way I wanted to go with this sequence. And then this is sort of like a bit of everything. This was a painting done from a storyboard. This is a photo bash thing. This is actually a model that I lit and then did Photoshop painting on. So however you get there, however you get there. I just tried to get something up there quickly so that in these mood boards, I could get buy-offs from the people who I need to get buy-offs from so I can keep moving forward. Which takes you, once you get those buy-offs, now you can start your color script. So how do I do color keys, and how do you do color keys? Well, there's 100 different ways to go about this, and somebody else will tell you a different way to do them, but there's really two ways that I've done them, either from hand-drawn storyboards, which is kind of what this one was, because I knew this was the storyboard for it, but I knew the set had already kind of changed. So I just kind of redrew it and did it in what I knew the staging was going to be more like. But this is just hand painted all from scratch. Or this is the most typical way, is at this stage that you usually do your color keys, things have gone into final layout or rough layout. And this is a frame that is the layout from Scoob in a very low res rough render, and this is normally the kind of thing we paint on. And it's, you can see this is what we get, and this is what we turn it into. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but this we know then is exactly where everything is going to be sitting in that shot, and it makes it easier for us to make a key out of it. So then once you start painting keys, you start laying them out into a color script. So let's talk about a couple different color scripts that I've worked on and the different ways to organize them. This one I put in just because it's really fun, and it's from a movie you'll never see that because it never got made, and I was the production designer on it for all of like 5 months. But I really love this color script. This is the first act for what would have been that movie, and it was for a pitch to actually get the movie greenlit and moving forward. And what the directors did at that time was they had boarded out the entire first act together, just the two of them. And I said, give me those boards. And what I did was I strung them together. So like this first section here is made up of about like 1, 2, 3, 4 storyboards. This is like 1, 2, 3, 4. And I strung them all together into sort of like a moving, visual that like your eye goes through the entire first act, kind of bleed them all together. It was a really fun way to think about doing a color script that I'd actually like to try again on another film. But this is the more typical way that we do color scripts, is individual paintings, several per sequence, lay out all the sequences together. And when you look at it like this is the entire movie done in small paintings for a color script. So this is Open Season, which we're going to touch on more closely. This is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, that we'll definitely touch on more closely, and we'll talk about the difference between how this color script came about as opposed to how I thought about this color script. And Hotel Transylvania 2, we won't get into specifically, but I wanted to put this up there here to show you that color script. And then the last one that we'll really dive into is the Scoob color script. And again, there was a completely different thinking of how I thought about light and color in this one as opposed to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So let's talk about all of those. But before we do, let's take one little step backwards. Learning on the job. People ask me a lot, how did you start doing things like this and becoming, a colorist and a lighter on films and everything? And it really started with the jobs that I had all leading up to becoming an art director and becoming a production designer. And what it was for many years, I was a background painter at Disney Feature Animation, working on traditional 2D hand-painted with paint on board with brushes features. All this top row up here were all 2D traditional hand-painted movies. And I got to work on those and paint paintings every day based on, at the time, the art director I would be working on, their color scripts. And I learned a lot from that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But then I moved on to CG, and my first CG feature was Open Season, and became a visual development artist. And things sort of grew from there. The Cloudy movies, the Hotel Transylvania movies, and eventually on to Scoob. So as a background painter, this was the kind of stuff that I did. Now, this is one that I actually came up with the colors with myself. It was a development piece, but already starting to experiment and explore color. But then on pieces like this was something that an art director had a color script that they had done. And, they did these small little hand done color scripts, and we fleshed them out into full on big paintings for the actual movie. But you learn, one of the best ways to learn is it's almost like an apprenticeship. You have somebody that has been doing this a long time, and you kind of glean and pull from their knowledge, and it goes into your brain computer, and it makes you a better artist to understand different color palettes and qualities of light, and what kind of lighting an art director decides to use for a mood of a scene. So just doing this day in, day out, doing this type of painting helped me understand different color palettes, different qualities of light, and what qualities of light worked best for that scene in the movie. Because I'd watch the movie and you go, oh, I see why they use those colors, because that works with the mood for this sequence. So it was a great way to learn and start to understand color and light on the job. It's from Fantasia, from Atlantis, Home on the Range. This was for the Beauty and the Beast reissue, where we added in a whole new sequence to it. And some Atlantis stuff. So here, okay, so here's a good example too. So this is from Fantasia 2000. And the other thing I learned as being a background painter was how to keep your backgrounds from overpowering the characters, because, well, they're the backgrounds. And so the characters always need to be something like, I always used to feel like when I did a background painting, it felt unfinished. It felt incomplete somehow. It felt like something was missing. And it's like, well, something is missing. It's called the characters. You're painting a stage for the characters to act on. So this is a shot from the Firebird Suite in Fantasia 2000. Here's the shot with the character in it. So you can see there's that pop of that green really, makes that character, stand out from the background and not get, overtaken by it. And I use that same philosophy when I'm lighting things now. I find ways, I say a lot of times to lighters, the background, I wanna feel it, but I don't want to see it. And they know what I mean when I'm saying, like, it's like I want to feel like there's a lot of stuff there, but don't put a spotlight on every little thing in there, or else it's going to take away from the action and the acting. Like this shot in Atlantis, this is very clear. You kind of know where things are happening, the staging, but once you get the characters in there, you really see how we played the lighting on the characters to stand out and pop from the background. So the first movie that we're going to talk about a color script with is Open Season. And how this color script came about was, I have to say, honestly, there wasn't a global overall thinking to how we were going to use lighting in this movie. I think it just sort of happened spur of the moment. Like we'd go, let's just do this in this sequence. Let's do that in that sequence. The production designer for this movie, what he would do is he did black and white tonals for the shots that he wanted done in each sequence. And then we painted those tonals, is how this color script came around. And it was actually a really good system for this movie because the movie's so graphic. And by him doing these tonals in a very graphic way, it helped us never forget that this movie needs to stay this very graphic Ivan Earl type of style. This was one sequence, though, where I came up with an idea and pitched it to the directors. And they were like, yeah, the idea was that when Boog and Elliot, if you've seen the movie, they break into this like 7-Eleven type of store and they start eating all the candy. And I thought, like, the more candy they eat, what if we made it brighter and brighter, almost like they were on drugs and their like pupils were dilating. When your pupils dilate, everything gets blown out. So the more they were eating, the more blown out the light would get. So that once the cops came, like, boom, we go back into like more realistic lighting and we're out of their sort of crazy, their craziness, and it grounds us back to reality. Whereas here's a sequence where, I talked a little bit about the quality of light. Yeah, there's beautiful colors in this and everything, but what really makes this sequence is the quality of light, how contrasty it is. It added a lot to the scariness of this sequence in particular to have it so, like having pure blacks in there and some pure whites, like when the lightning would strike. It makes it a much more spooky sequence, as opposed to this, which is a more atmospheric light sequence where you can, feel the atmosphere outside, and it's sort of very sun drenched. So again, quality of light as opposed to, not just colors. It's also quality of light. Like this very somber moment in the movie, right colors, right kind of lighting. Here's like we talked about analogous or monochromatic backgrounds. This is pretty much an all blue palette for a sequence. Here's a great one. I like this sequence a lot. I got to do because it kind of has everything in one. You have like a pretty full range palette at the beginning of it, and then it goes underwater, becomes a monochromatic palette. And we use that as a bridge, that when they come out of the water, that we could change the light from being so happy at the top of the sequence to this more somber light when things get a little sadder. And then it gets very sad and very almost desaturated. We pull all the color out of it. That all happens in the same sequence. I love when we can kind of shift the mood and the tone within a sequence. And that's the final color script. So you can see all the different divisions and breakups of each sequence. But like I said, there wasn't an overall thought to like globally to how light was going to play in this movie. I think it just sort of happened with each sequence. And what do I mean by this overall thought? Well, let's talk about Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. When I presented this to the directors, I said, I'd like to think about the lighting in each act to almost be like a character. The 3 acts are this. I said, if I could only pick one color for each act of this movie, gray for the first one, like a bright blue for the second one, and outrageous pink, magenta for the third one. Meaning like, this is the things before it goes crazy, this is the happy times, and this is when things have gone completely haywire times. And the guys were like, that's great, let's do that. So let me break down this color script a little bit for you. Here's Act 1. So another thing that we're going to talk about more when we talk about Scoob is colors that are based on a character, which I didn't really do so much in this movie, except for the character of Flint. So this first beginning of this movie is the time where we introduce Flint's colors. Flint's colors are blue and orange. If you go back and watch that movie now, there's no way you cannot see how much blue and orange, now that I've told you that. It's all over the place, and it's pretty much Flint's colors. But like I said, I didn't think about so much character colors, like for each character in the movie, just Flint. This movie was divided into acts. So Act 1, like I said, is naturalistic lighting. It's very desaturated. And think about it like dark shapes over light, these sort of blown out light skies. But all throughout Act 1, you'll see there's this telegraphing of things to come. You have these rainbows all over the place. I started putting these touches of color in these rainbows. It's telegraphing what is going to be coming in the third act. Even in this sequence, you start out almost completely desaturated. And then all of a sudden, a little bit of color, a little bit more color, and a little bit more color. And by the time you end it, it's a big rainbow, bright sequence. I mean, I can't believe that you start here and you end here. And look at the color bars. This was an easy way to pitch it to them and say, top of the sequence, no color. End of the sequence, lots of color. So Act 2 is when things are going well for Flint. And so I looked at a lot of like Technicolor movies and just said, let's just make this really, really colorful, really, really juicy when things are going his way. So you have sequences like this and the Jello mold. And this is the song sequence where I was like, think of movies like Lion King. When they break into I Just Can't Wait to Be King, it becomes this like, song sequence, colorful, like even the style of it changes, becomes really bright. I said, let's do something like that when we see the town change. And even here, like I had these, when people are making their food requests, there are these monochromatic pops of color, again, telegraphing rainbow, things to come, rainbow, things to come. So like all these different pops of green to red to blue to orange. telegraphing things that will be coming up in the future. But again, really saturated. So here, this is still in Act 2. So here you can see using the characters' colors. Here's the blue and orange again for Flint, but you can see they're not as pure as earlier on when he was young and ambitious and everything. This is when things start going sour for him. Like he walks home and you see these giant hot dogs in here, and it's like now the blue's a bit desaturated, the yellow's kind of sickly, the orange is a little sickly, showing that something is wrong for our hero. Our hero's colors, blue and orange. So he goes into here. Remember the scene? He analyzes the hot dogs, and there's this whole big blue and orange thing. And here's a combination of character colors, blue and orange, and also quality of lighting. And yes, I completely stole this from Return of the Jedi. It's the scene where Luke is like hiding from Vader when they're having their fight, and he's just like, Luke is thinking, am I good? Am I dark? Remember that shot? He had blue on his face and light on the other. Well, this is exactly the same thing. Is he going to do the wrong thing? Is he going to do the right thing? Or actually, this is technically the wrong thing is the right thing. Do I shut it off or do I keep the food going? And it's his choice. So splitting him down the middle with his own accent colors. And then, of course, things go crazy, bringing us into Act 3. So if Act 1 was light skies with dark over it and naturalistic lighting created by nature, by Act 3, the weather is now being created by a machine. So I wanted it to be the exact opposite of Act 1. It is now dark skies with light over dark, light over dark. And the colors are unnatural. It comes from different angles. It becomes rainbow colors from unnatural sources to show that everything has gone 180. It's completely flipped from where we started in this movie. And telegraphing, like we've said, all these rainbow colors, the rainbow gummy bears, and even at the end when the clouds are sort of blown away, it's with a big rainbow. And you always end with, it's a new day. I did an early morning, like bright, happy ending. And it's the start of a new day for our heroes. So again, that's another way to think about a color script where it's not just random thinking what will look best for this sequence. Sometimes you can think about the color and the lighting having its own arc, like a character. Oh, this is really cool. So this is the color script from Cloudy. And as the bar goes past, it goes from being my paintings to being the actual frame of the movie. And what's cool about this is that total props to Sony ImageWorks in how great they really followed what we set up. And that's important because like we spend a lot of time doing those keys and getting the approvals from directors that if, they didn't follow them, it's like, well, what were we working so hard to get the approval and get all the notes from the directors on? So it's great that they really take it to heart and try to match it as close as they can. You can see, I mean, it's pretty dead on. All right, so let's talk about Scoob. So thought about Scoob in a different way from with Cloudy. There's the three worlds in Scoob. So what do I mean by that? So the Scoob world aesthetic will be the umbrella that houses two other distinct style worlds inside of it, the world of Blue Falcon and the world of Dick Dastardly. All three worlds will have their own stylistic rules to create visual contrast, but they should never feel like three separate movies. All right, let's explain that. So to me, it's a Scooby-Doo movie. So it's always going to have the aesthetic of a Scooby-Doo movie, but within the Scooby-Doo movie, we have a Dick Dastardly movie, and we have a Blue Falcon movie. And I used this one, I wanted to base the lighting different than Cloudy, where it was lighting and the colors had an arc. I wanted to base the lighting and the quality of light on the characters. Basically, when certain characters were winning or were in charge of a scene, you'll see one kind of colors and lighting. And when another character is in charge of a scene, you'll see another kind of colors and lighting. So let's explain that a little bit further. So the palettes are Mystery Inc., meaning the gang. And you can see it's derived from the colors that we associate with the Scooby-Doo gang. The Mystery Machine, their iconic clothing, outfits. Those are the colors that make up the Scoob world colors. So you can see a sequence here where you see all those colors coming into play. Then there's the colors of the Falcon Force. Well, he's blue Falcon, so obviously blue is the biggest color that you're going to experience with him. But then it's also like their accent colors. Dee Dee's red, Falcon red, the F on his chest, the gold, Dynomutt's green. And then there's Dick Dastardly. So his big purple coat, his is violet, sickly yellows, rusty reds, and sickly greens. Those are the palettes of Dastardly. So you can see the distinct three worlds. These are three shots right from the movie. So when you look now, knowing that, when you look at this, not knowing what takes place in it, you can go, oh, there's a Dastardly scene. Oh, that's clearly Blue Falcon. There's the gang. You can see these moments played out in the color script and who's in charge of what sequence. So let's start talking about the sequences individually. So like I said, when we open, it's the Scooby world, it's Shaggy, it's Scooby meeting for the first time. Oh, by the way, I'm dropping major spoiler alerts. If you haven't seen my movie, that's on you. You should have seen that movie before we started. So huge spoiler alerts coming. I'm going to tell you the whole movie when we go through this thing. So it's a origin story. We see Shaggy and Scooby meet for the first time. And of course, it has to be the most iconic colors where you can see almost all the colors of the Mystery Machine in here. And so when I say I use those colors, it doesn't mean you have to use them verbatim, like the exact value and tint of blue that is on the Mystery Machine. If you darken it down or sometimes saturate it up, or desaturate it, you can still use that palette, but it's still using their hero colors. Like the walls in Shaggy's room are almost identical to the Mystery Machine colors. And you can see the blue and orange on his bed that come right from Mystery Machine colors. And then it's about shaping those into the quality of light, that very tender moment between two this budding friendship in there. It's this really beautiful moment between the two of them, but it's still in their colors. Then we go into their first Halloween together, and I opened it up as a very, a pretty nice evening for Halloween until we get to the creepy old Rigby house that everybody on the street says is haunted. And what I did was, it's still, that this blue-green is very the gang. That's very much the color of the Mystery Machine, but we used it to create this fog bank that somehow only sits around the creepy old house to immediately change the quality of light. So still using the colors of the palette of the gang, but changing the quality of light to make it spookier. And when we get inside, the reason I also did this was when we got inside, I wanted a really bright light to come in and shine its light on through the windows and the doors so that I could create. So like if you see in this fourth panel down here, remember in Scooby-Doo, they would have these crazy like light shapes that the characters would sort of come in and act in and out of. And they didn't really make sense to, like, if you look at this door shape and this shape back here, they're not the same shape, but I don't care. This is what they did in Scooby-Doo. They would have, these great light shapes, and that was my way of justifying it by having it bright out there and having that light come in to create these light shapes inside the house, where, of course, they meet a ghost and they debunk it. It's not a ghost. It's creepy old Mr. Rigby, who's been trying to keep everybody out of the house so he can keep all the stolen goods that's hidden in the back of the armoire to himself. Here's a really clear one. Like now we've moved forward in the movie where we see the gang grown up, and it's all of their colors, clearly their signature clothing colors, but also making the booth the color of the Mystery Machine sort of sets it all off. And you can really feel it's a very Scoob and the gang centric scene. Then you have this sequence. It takes place in the bowling alley. We saw that mood board I did a little earlier. And to me, in this one, it's not so much about the gang's colors. Is like this was our first big action sequence in the movie. So what I wanted to do was sort of divide the temperatures in the bowling alley, that on one side it's really warm, and as you get back towards the pins, it's really cool. And the reason I wanted to do that was I knew there was going to be a big chase sequence in the warmer area. So we could really turn up the heat, literally, like make it redder, more intense, bring up the action and the scariness of that. And then the gang, Scooby and Shaggy, sort of try to escape from this by going down towards the blue. And what I'm saying with that is I'm telegraphing. I love telegraphing ideas. Maybe on second or third watch, you go, oh, blue equals safety. Because what's blue? Red is bad in this sequence. Blue is Blue Falcon. They go and you think it's the end for our heroes here. They're all surrounded by these the Rottens, as they're called, these little robots, and they're all bathed in red. And then this blue beam comes down. And they were going towards the blue in the bowling alley. Blue was safety. So these are two development paintings that were actually, this is a development painting. This is a scene from the movie. Oh, and the reason we bathed that back bowling room in such a bright red light was pretty much to get it so that it would, when the door came down, it would just explode red light into that alleyway, giving the Rottens, making it look like they were winning until the big blue beam comes down and at the last minute saves our heroes. So then that takes us into sort of that movie within the movie, the world of Blue Falcon, which you can see very blue, his palette very clean. That's the other thing too, beyond just the quality of light and the color of the light in this, it's very well lit. It's almost like being in an Apple store where you can see everything, but also everything is very clean, like being in an Apple store, which is supposed to be the exact opposite of who our villain is. If Blue Falcon's our superhero and Dick Dastardly's our supervillain, they should be 180 of each other. So these are the kind of choices and things you should think about. Nothing should be done for the sake of just doing it. You should make choices that you can justify somehow. So for me, the lighting, the color, and even the surfaces should be 180, 100% different from our bad guy. So you can see, again, when Blue Falcon is having his moment, everything blue, that's his color, until something goes wrong and we're back in the red again. We've already established that red is bad, with the Rottens that were chasing us in the bowling alley. And yes, it is bad. Dick Dastardly is chasing their ship, and this is where you first see the inside of Dastardly's ship, and look at the difference between the inside of Falcon's ship and the inside of Dastardly's ship. Not just the colors, but it's also the quality of light. Dastardly's ship has this underlighting, way more sinister, and everything is dirty and rusty and grimy, and everything here is clean and pristine. And we also, with this sequence, really showcasing, giving sort of this dark neutral sky so that you could really see the blue of Blue Falcon and sort of the rusty oranges of Dastardly, the two different, yin and yang, chasing each other and fighting against each other. And this is the first time we get a really good look at inside Dastardly's ship. And you can see it's that palette I talked about: rusty reds, sickly yellows, sickly greens. That's Dastardly's palette, the purple of his jacket, but also the quality of the light. Remember I said that Blue Falcon, his world is kind of like an Apple store where it's lit. There isn't a corner of the room that's dark. Dastardly has very dark corners, and I almost wanted it to be little spotlights. I was looking at the movie The Shape of Water, and looking at like the holding area where they have the creature in there, and there were these great little pockets of like light, and then it would go dark and light and go dark. And I said, "Ooh, there's a really great feeling to that. I'd like to do something like that with Dastardly's ship." So you can see it's little pockets, the light and the furnace, making areas where he can walk in and out of the light. And I just thought that gave more to his character. So here's a sequence that takes place in an abandoned amusement park. And again, now that I've told you about what colors equal what character, when you see sickly yellow, already from the beginning, it's not going to be good for our heroes. These aren't their colors. The only place that, Blue Falcon's color, and it keeps getting dwindled away little by little in this sequence, this is safety. Shaggy and Scooby, for a reason, wanted to stay here. They're in the safe. They're in the blue. But no, they go and venture out, and the blue gets less and less and less, to where, of course, Dastardly does come and add his purple ship in here, and we have a full-on Dastardly palette. Dastardly is in charge. Dastardly is winning. So it's all Dastardly colors. Like, look at this inside this arcade. This is all Dastardly's palettes. Purple, rusty reds, sickly greens, and yellows. It's all him. Where they go in, and then they go into this hall of mirrors. And this was sort of a break from all of that thinking where we wanted to do something. Our director, Tony, had this idea, and I think it's a really fantastic one, where we wanted to make the Hall of Mirrors almost like a nightmare for Scooby. So when he first comes in, the lighting is more grounded in what it would really be. But the further that he goes into the maze of this Hall of Mirrors, it becomes these monochromatic. He's one color, Dastardly's another, and it's like being inside of a nightmare, So it just becomes this nightmarish dream thing. And then eventually, when we get to the bottom of the scene, it becomes more grounded. And this red is no longer like the nightmare. It's actually the red of an exit sign. But it was kind of a great way to come into the scene and have it be grounded, have it become nightmarish and surreal, and then it becomes grounded again at the end. And then we finish the fight out again, Dastardly winning and all in his palette until, again, being saved by the blue. The blue comes in, feels very foreign in this environment, and that is Blue Falcon winning even just a little bit. So meanwhile, while all that's going on, we have these sequences with the gang. And if you look, it's their palette again, just darkened down, richened up a little bit. All of the gang's colors are represented in here just in a darker, different way, except for these little pops of red. So when you thought this rotten that was in the back of the mystery machine was deactivated, when he comes on, you're like, uh-oh, bad things. I put this one in here too, just to show you a little something that we know what Blue Falcon's palette is. And when Scooby, when they realize that Scooby's sort of the chosen one and Blue Falcon thinks he's special, he gives him a suit. And now if you look, before Scooby and Shaggy were kind of foreign, their colors in Blue Falcon's world, and they should have been because they're not of that world. But all of a sudden Scooby does good and Blue Falcon's eyes, and Falcon gives him a suit. Now Scooby is becoming part of this environment and this color palette, where Shaggy, who's feeling left out, is just that visually. He doesn't fit in with this palette. He is left out on the outside, and his colors represent that. This is just a fun sequence that where the gang gets pulled over by a cop, and it starts out on a fairly sunny day, but this was a good one to sort of change the quality of lighting, talking about that, where it starts out sunny, and by the time we get to the end and you realize that the beautiful cop is not a beautiful cop, despite what Fred thinks, rips off the disguise, and it's Dastardly, and this storm has been moving in, so that when we get to the bottom of the scene, it's all purple. Again, Dastardly's colors, Dastardly's winning. He has sucked the mystery machine up into his ship. Straightforward Blue Falcon, the scene going through the ice cave, obviously very Blue Falcon-y, very blue, until we break through the ice of the ice cave and we come to Mystery Island. And that almost, I could say, is a fourth world in this movie, is that I wanted it to feel like its own thing. It should be magical. It should be, again, maybe going back to my subconsciously cloudy, it's all rainbows. I wanted to get a full palette in there. This was a development painting I did, the first one for Mystery Island, or Caveman Island as we were calling it. And you can see it's a full rainbow in there, very different from any other place in the movie. And that's what I wanted it to be, a magical, special place. And you can see, here's the full rainbow palette. And look, these guys shouldn't feel quite as part of this world. They kind of stand out in a weird way because they aren't of this world. I like having the characters feel foreign from the environments that they're in, if they are truly foreigners in it. Oh yeah, telegraphing. You can see here, I started, telegraphing just in the darker recesses. It gets a little more purple. This isn't purple for Dastardly, it's just purple for Danger, where they meet up with somebody, and we'll get to that and who that person is in a second. I put this one in here because this is really important sequence. So it's a Dastardly colored palette, Dastardly kind of light, that underlight kind of thing, which is more sinister. But you can see here's a color that I had in. It's not a sickly green. It's a very crisp, vibrant green. And that is the introduction of magic. The magic in this movie, this green equals magic. So that becomes very important in the third act. To round out Act 2, though, you can see when we have a fight between Blue Falcon and Captain Caveman. Now look, Captain Caveman is from this world and he sits in it very naturally, where Blue Falcon kind of stands out from it. So that's a way to think about how to use your characters and their colors and how you play them in an environment. Of course, the fight, it's sort of a friendly, playful fight until Dastardly shows up and things get out of hand. And of course, I needed to change the lighting when Dastardly came, so it didn't look friendly anymore. So I thought, what if when the Mean Machine comes in, it kicks up all this dust, which makes the environment very rusty orange. Again, one of Dastardly palette colors. Now you know Dastardly again is winning and has the upper hand and takes the gang away. You can see like this is very Dastardly palette and he has won again, which leaves our heroes, as they think, stranded on the island. This one wasn't so much for getting colors that represented a character, but this was a quality of light choice where I wanted it to make it where the light was coming through some clouds, some condensation that's in this cave, and it was creating beams. One, because it created, for the top of the act, a somber feeling, but it also created these spotlights. So when Shaggy has this hero moment where he goes up and he gives his big hero speech on the rock, it's like he has a natural spotlight on him to deliver his message and rally the troops, which takes us into Act 3, which starts out in Athens, Greece, and everything is sort of a typical sunset day until this big purple Dastardly color comes creeping in. It literally creeps over the environment, and it's the shadow from the Mean Machine. And that's when we see the green, the magic color now coming together with Dastardly's purple. And this was something that from day one, Tony, the director, and I talked about. We wanted Act 3 to be in this purple and green because it is such a classic Scooby-Doo palette. Go back and look. You'll find this palette used many, many times in Scooby-Doo. And we knew we wanted to have like Dastardly is the purple, the magic's the green, super Scooby-Doo moment. But what it also afforded us too is if you have that set up, it gave us moments where, so whenever that was the dominant palette, you knew Dastardly was winning, but it gave us moments where we could have hero moments separate from Dastardly winning. Like this moment, when I read in the script that there was going to come this moment, and yeah, the biggest spoiler alert right now, everyone kept asking us really early on, where's Fred's ascot? Where's Fred's ascot? And then I read in the script that Tony had an idea of how to get the ascot in. I did this quick color key and I was like, it's got to be like this, sort of this Braveheart, orange for the ascot moment with Fred. These are the keys that came out of that for this hero moment and resulted in my favorite moment of the movie. This is my favorite part. That's awesome. So yeah, that's my favorite one hero moment within the Act 3. And the second one is this. So we have that, again, that purple environment. And we have this moment of doubt. Blue Falcon is feeling like he can't be the superhero that his father was. He's actually the son, for those of you who haven't seen it. He's the son of the original Blue Falcon, and he's having a hard time filling those shoes. And he has this sort of pep speech by Dynamite, who tells him, like, you literally, you can fly, right? You should fly. And he thinks it's metaphorically, and he says, no, literally, you have wings, you can fly. And I had this idea, what if when the wings open up, they're, luminescent and they are blue, so that what it would do is bathe this area in blue light. So what we're saying is this is our heroes coming back. Blue Falcon has his moment in his hero color. And what it also did was, in the midst of all this crazy fighting, you never lost Blue Falcon. You always were able to see him. So what was something that wasn't planned, it was literally an 11th hour decision. And I'm glad we were able to get it done quickly, because it really helped us see, if you watch those fight sequences, you never lose the animation because his color is so distinct and stands out from all the rest. Again, so see the movie, see what happens. Dastardly is defeated, but at a cost. The magic is wiped away, and Athens has returned, but again, at a cost. And here we talked about this earlier in the talk about somber lighting and uh, portraying the character's sadness. And then, oh, I'm getting a phone call. Don't call me now. So, which brings us to the ending of the movie, which I was really, really happy with how this came out. So we have that moment, and the magic has one last trick for us, where it brings this statue that has a riddle that is red, and it brings back our friend. But all the while, if you watch what's happening to the quality of the light, it is early, early, early morning. And with each shot, I was like, I want the sun to rise just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, so that when we get to this moment where our heroes are reunited, the light is hitting them just right. And then it finally becomes our bad guys are exposed, and it's the beginning of a brand new day. But this happens if you watch this sequence. Watch how from shot to shot to shot the sun is slowly coming up. The way I described it is, if you want to go back to a classic Disney movie, there's a shot in Jungle Book where two of the characters are talking. I can't remember who it is. It's like Baloo and Shere Khan or something like that. I can't remember. And they're talking about what to do with Mowgli. And the sequence starts at night. And as they're talking, if you look, each shot is getting a little bit brighter and brighter. And one of them says, well, we'll tell him in the morning. And he says, it's morning now. And you don't realize as the audience that you've been so engrossed in their dialogue that during the sequence, the sun has been rising the whole time. And that's what I wanted to do in this shot. Which takes us to our happy ending. Always got to have the big happy ending. But what I wanted to do in this one wasn't just make it all Scoob gang colors. We said, what if we did a really rich blue sky? Because now the two forces have kind of come together and become friends. So it's the Scoob gang and the Falcon Force gang, excuse me, have come together, and we tried to come up with a palette that said both of those things and left us on this big happy ending. And that is the end. So, oh my gosh, and it's just, okay, I think we just hit an hour. So
yeah, that was fantastic. And it's so cool that you came in and kind of gave spoilers for the Scoob movie, because I think I remember this time last year, you were talking about the Scoob movie before it had come out, and like the Mystery Machine was at the expo.
Yeah. And I was only allowed to say very, very, very few things in that last talk. So this was great that I could lay it all out. And I hope that anyone who hasn't seen it will now see it with sort of new eyes, Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Leaf.
If you look at the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, there are questions there.
Got it.
Yeah, I can read some of these to you if you would like for me to.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're a little over time, but I think that's fine. This first question is asking, can you talk about color key artists or color stylists? What is their role in visual development, and what is an entry-level position or a pathway to get to that position?
Well, usually it's not an entry-level position unless you're like one of these sort of wonderkin like artists that somehow has been doing color scripts during their whole life, or they're in school. It's one of these things that being a background painter, I came into Viz Dev, and you saw that journey, and eventually was asked to do this thing. And on Scoob, I orchestrated the color script, but I found the painters that I thought had the best sort of command of color and light, and asked them to help me flesh out certain sequences. So it's one of those things that if you want to get into, make sure any movie that you're on, if you're on a Viz Dev, just a general Viz Dev artist or something like that, I think if you show a real command of color and light, that it's a job that eventually will find you. I don't really know that it's like, unless you've been doing it, it's very hard for people to hire you as that. We brought in, I remember we were really getting pressed for time, and we had to bring in an extra color key artist, and we found someone basically looking at their portfolio and going, there's a ton of color keys on here. So it's kind of a thing that you need to do and show that you can do to be hired as that. is the way I think about it.
And what about for yourself? What was your trajectory to getting to where you are now?
I mean, really, it was those steps that I showed you. You know, going from being a background painter to a visual development artist. And I have a whole other talk that I do that's called "Just Say Yes." And it's like I didn't say no to anything. It was like, so when I made the leap from background painter to visual development artist, they said, "Hey, have you ever painted characters before?" And I was like, "Well, no, I was a background painter." They were like, "Would you like to give it a shot?" And I said, "Yeah." So I painted characters, and I painted almost all the character paints for several, like Open Season and Cloudy and everything. And then they asked, "Have you ever done a color script before?" And it was like, "No, I've done color keys before when I was working at Disney, but I've never done the whole script." And they're like, "Would you like to try it?" Yeah. So I just jumped into it. If they were offering it, I was saying yes to it. And next thing I know, that became art director. And hey, have you ever production designed before? No. Would you like to? Yes. So I just said yes and figured it out. Kind of had a lot of belief in myself and figured if they were asking that they had some belief in me too. So that was my trajectory. I don't know if it's the same for everybody else.
Yeah, I still think it's super valuable to hear. This next question is asking, what's the biggest difference between working as a background artist and as a production designer?
Wow. Well, okay, as a background artist back in the day, you were taking your leads from other people like art directors and production designers. Production designer is basically, I will say this, production designer is half about being an artist and the other half about being a manager and a communicator. Because it's not about being the best artist in the room. It's being able to hire some of the best artists that you can get, having a vision that you can share with them and having them help you realize that vision. But then you, as the production designer, have to listen to you have to be a great listener first. You have to listen to your director and what kind of movie they want to make, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about: making the movie and putting the vision up on the screen that the director wants. So listen, go back to your team, communicate to them. This is what I hear and what I think he or she wants. You do artwork, you present it back to said director or executives or whoever. So like I said, it's yes, an artist, but you also have to hire your team, manage the team, communicate to that team, and present the work of that team to people. It's a very involved job. Where being a background painter was basically, I was given an assignment, I was given color keys. In the end, I was asked to produce color keys, which was great. They had trusted me in that. But in the beginning, it was like, here's your layout you're going to paint. This is the palette that you're going to paint it in. You have a week, have at it. You know what I mean? So it was like decisions were being made for me then, and then I was making the decisions.
This next person wants to know, how closely do color stylists collaborate with the other departments in production?
Okay, I have to admit, so color stylist I think that's a TV thing, like, but color styling the characters' colors for what color you're gonna, cell paint. I've never worked in television. I've worked in feature, so it's not something like color stylist that I've actually worked with. Usually, it's just when we do the color keys, um, we think about the characters and the environments and everything and how they all work as one. Um, as far as like, I can kind of shift that question a little bit, but also, me being I like to lead the color charge and the lighting charge and have other people help me. But I'm always thinking about it, even when we're designing um, props and sets and things like that. You don't want to create colors like I said, we did things in white light. I talked about that one room being painted in white light. You want to make sure that the colors that you paint things aren't going to go against the lighting that you're planning on using for them. So I'm often directing the visual development artists to paint things in certain ways so that I know it's going to work with the lighting that I have up here in my head if I don't have already a mood board or a color key to give them. So I know it's not going to go counter to what we actually want to do with the lighting.
This might actually kind of lead into something we get a lot of questions about, which is some people are confused about job titles and job roles. Do you hear a lot of titles that are used interchangeably? And like, what are some key differences people who want to do this kind of work should be looking for?
Totally. I get this question all the time, and this is how it's presented to me. What's the difference between a production designer and an art director? I have no idea. I don't know. Production designer is the lead. Production designer is sort of the head artist of the art department, and maybe like the art director is his like second in command, his or her second in command. And it depends on the show that you're on. With Cloudy, I was the art director. Justin Thompson was the production designer. And basically, this is how we divided those chores. He said, I'm going to design things, and I'm going to work primarily with the design team. You're going to color things and texture things, and you're going to work with the color and texture things. He goes, I'll have a say and opinions on those, but basically, that's how we're going to divide our responsibilities. On other movies, it's been different. I mean, on Hotel Transylvania 2, I had a art director who was very design orientated. And I said, great, you're going to work with the design team and I'm going to work more with the color team. That's just the opposite of what I did with Cloudy. So it really is just like, one artist should have an overall vision, but it's great to have another person's eye and opinion on that. And that's usually what the art director is on the show.
The next question is asking, how many artists usually work on something like a color script, and how long does it take?
So I'll do the preliminary overall thing and try to do like at least one painting, and I do all those mood boards too, and at least one painting that can set the other artists off. And so between myself and usually the art director and maybe two other key artists. So we had 4 artists, I believe, doing color keys on Scoob. And that pretty much was enough. On Hotel Transylvania, there was just 3 of us doing keys. And on Cloudy, there was 2 of us doing keys. So it all depends. I mean, if I had my way, I'd want to do the whole movie, but it's impossible. There's just too much. But I can get things started so that I can hand other artists and go, this is where I want to go, because I know it works in that overall arc that I've set up and pitched and told, the directors, explained to the directors that this is where we're going. So, yeah, it all depends. It's feature to feature, it's different.
This next question is coming from someone who's a little bit confused about which comes first, environment design or the color script.
Environment design comes first. Usually design is done in black and white. And then when the black and white, either drawings or sometimes built models are built, sometimes we'll have designers that just work in CG. And they'll just build a model, but they'll keep it grayscale, and then we'll get renders of that, and a viz dev artist can paint on top of that model. Or it's just a line drawing or a tonal done by somebody, and then it's handed off to somebody who's better with color, and they paint it up. So usually the design comes first, gets approved, then it goes to paint and texturing, and we do that again in a very white light way, and then we figure out how, when it's in a lighting situation, what now that environment will look like when you apply actual theatrical light to it.
Very cool. I think that clears up a lot of questions here. We're getting this question a lot, and I think Fraser did put a lot of links in the chat, but a lot of people want to know if you have any sort of resources or books that you recommend for people to learn more about this.
I don't. I haven't really looked and read any books about it ever. I just, what? It's great to listen to these talks and how I approach it. And if there is I don't even know if there's a book about color scripting. I mean, there's all the art of books that have color scripts in them. And I get those and I like to look at those. You can find them online. You can find color scripts online. But like I said, a lot of the choices, if you saw when I said, how do I start with color bars and color keys? Start with the basics. You know what I mean? It's like, come up with a palette that works, complements, analogous, monochromatic, triad kind of things. And then maybe throw in that mystery color that all of a sudden pops out. Like we talked about, the environment should look like it's missing something, and then the character is the pop. You know, I'd say experiment with the basics, because the basics are there for a reason. They're there for a reason. And then my other biggest thing is watch tons of movies and TV shows. I mean, TV shows, these like streaming shows now are so cinematic and gorgeous. And here's a thing you can do. You do color studies from them, So pull up the Queen's Gambit, right? And get a frame of that, and then have that over here, and you have Photoshop over here, and look at it and try to do a color study from it. And look at how gorgeous those palettes are in that show. They're these sort of desaturated, muted, complementary color palettes and everything like that. Learn from people who have already gone through their journey and are doing the jobs. That's how it was done back in the day, like way back in the day. Like it was always the master and apprenticeship type of thing, where the old master would get an apprentice and they'd make them copy their own paintings. They'd say, copy my painting I did here. Learn my techniques. That's how you learn. So there's no shame in copying somebody else's work. Just don't call it your own. Do it as a resource and a tool for helping you learn and understand. I think that's what background painting did for me. I had somebody giving me a small little color key and saying, now you have to do a great big detailed painting based on this. And you learn from that. You put it in your brain computer, and all of a sudden you spit it back out, when it's your turn to come up with those choices. So my point is experience. Look at things. Go out and plein air paint things from life. Learn how lighting works realistically. Just like Picasso, we think of Picasso as this guy who did all this cubist, crazy kind of stuff. But the reason he could do that so well was because if you look at his early work, he could draw realistically incredibly well. He knew how to do realism. He knew how to abstract because he knew how things worked realistically, so that he knew how to abstract from the realism. If you go out and paint from life, you'll understand how light works, and then you can figure out how to push that into more theatrical light. You can figure out how to break that light and make it different from what light physics would tell you, if that is what's right for a scene. So, just, yes, books are great and listening to my talk is great, but your experience is what's going to make you good at this. And that to me is like, see as much as you can, watch as many movies as you can, animated and live action, and go out and look at light from life. Become a photographer, like an amateur photographer. Take photographs. Do plein air painting studies if you can. As much life experience as you can come back out in your actual work.
Wow, that was such an amazing answer. I almost just want to end it on that one. I will ask just one last question, and then we'll let you get on. But the last question is, do you professionally still use traditional mediums to paint?
It has been a long time, and I feel really bad about it.
What about personally? Do you still paint traditionally?
I haven't. The last time I picked up a brush and painted with, when I do, I like to use gouache. It's got to be a couple of years now. And then before that, it was probably like 8 years or something like that. I paint everything digital now. I did 10 years as a traditional painted artist. And once I got into digital, I really got into it and saw the value in it. But that said, my end goal, like when I retire, is all I want to do is relearn to be a traditional painter again. And I should be doing it. But it's like, if I do plein air studies, I do them on my iPad. It's so cool with like all these, like with Procreate or something like that. And you can just do that. It's cleaner, it's easier. It's just like, you can do it on a whim. But that said, there's nothing like painting. I miss painting traditionally. It was so great having it on your hands and getting it on your clothes, believe it or not. It was like, really felt like an artist. And I'd like to do it again. I really would, but I don't right now.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you for staying a little over just to answer
Thanks for
some of the
everybody else
Q&A.
for staying too. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
That's going to bring us to the end of our talk with you today. If there's anything else you wanted to add on.
No, I mean, the only thing I'll add is, like, if I didn't answer your question, you know, I'm on Twitter. You can find me. I'm M. Kurinsky, you know, on Twitter. I'll answer your question if you tweet it to me, you know, or whatever. You know, I can do that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and just everybody, thank you so much, CTN, for having me. Thank you, Warner Brothers, for asking me to do this, and thank you guys, the viewers, for coming and watching this. This is a big part of my life, is trying to share my 26 plus years of knowledge and hopefully helping the next generation. I hope this helped you a little bit and answered some questions and helps you move forward in your journey as an artist.
Awesome. Thank you one more time.
Thanks, guys.